Welcome to the Explainer. So, how do we know what we know? Seriously, think about it. Today, we're diving into the 4 fundamental purposes of research that help us answer, well, just about everything.
Yeah, it's a huge question, right? And the answer? It isn't magic. Everything we understand about the world, from the medicine you take to the society we live in, it all starts with this one super powerful thing: research. And the best way to think about research is like a toolkit. I mean, you're not going to use a hammer to saw a board in half, right? It's the exact same idea here. The kind of question you're asking tells you which tool you need to grab to get a solid answer. So today, let's open up that toolkit and see what's inside.
All right, we're going to break down the 4 basic types of research. You've got descriptive, exploratory, correlational, and explanatory. And you can almost think of them as steps on a ladder. Each one answers a different kind of question, and they often build on each other to give us the full picture.
Okay, first up, let's talk about descriptive research. This one is all about painting a picture. It's the foundation, you know? Its job is just to give us a clear, accurate snapshot of what's going on.
The goal here is pretty simple, but it's absolutely crucial. It's all about accurately and systematically describing a situation or a group of people. Think of it as answering the who, what, where, and when questions. Super fundamental.
So, for example, a study might look at the professionalism of social work students over their 4 years. Now, a study like this isn't trying to figure out why their professionalism changes. Nope, it's just measuring it, documenting it, and giving us a really detailed, factual picture of that journey.
Okay, so let's make this real. Imagine we want to understand the living conditions in rural South Africa. If we're using a descriptive approach, what does that look like? What kind of information are we trying to gather?
Well, we'd be all about the facts. We'd be documenting things like access to clean water, surveying the average income, recording the types of housing people live in. You get the idea. We're not explaining anything or looking for connections just yet. We are laser-focused on building that solid, factual baseline of what the situation actually is.
All right, on to the next tool in our kit. So what happens when you're dealing with something so new or so vague that you don't even know what questions to ask yet? That's where exploratory research comes in. It's for when you're charting new territory.
You can think of this as the map maker's tool. You're going into the unknown. The goal isn't to come back with definitive answers. It's to explore the terrain, get a feel for the landscape, and figure out what the really important questions might even be in the first place.
So, let's stick with our South Africa example. Imagine we know next to nothing about the day-to-day challenges a specific community is facing. I mean, where would you even start?
Well, an exploratory study would involve things like conducting really open-ended interviews with community leaders, or maybe holding focus groups to just listen to what residents say their main concerns are. You're observing daily life, looking for things you didn't expect. The whole point is discovery, finding those first breadcrumbs that will lead to more focused research down the road.
Okay, now things get really interesting. This is where we start connecting the dots. Once we've described a situation, we can start looking for patterns to see how different pieces might be connected. And that brings us to our third tool, correlational research. This is the pattern finder. It looks at 2 or more things and asks a simple question. When this one thing changes, does that other thing change in a predictable way? Now this is super important. Correlation does not equal causation. It doesn't prove one thing causes the other, just that they seem to move in sync.
A really powerful and tragic example of this comes from the 1960s. Researchers started noticing a horrifying pattern, a sudden spike in babies born with severe birth defects. When they investigated, they found a connection. The mothers of these babies had all taken a specific drug, thalidomide. That established a powerful, life-saving correlation.
So, let's bring it back to our case study. What kind of patterns could we look for in rural South Africa? What dots could we try to connect? Well, a correlational study might investigate the relationship between, say, household income and access to education, or the link between the quality of sanitation and the rates of certain diseases. The whole goal is just to find those statistical links. Finding them is what points us toward those even deeper why questions.
And that leads us perfectly into our final, and yeah, often the most difficult tool in the kit, explanationary research. This is all about solving the why.
This is the detective's tool. We're moving beyond just what's happening or are these 2 things related. Now we're trying to tackle the ultimate question. Why is it happening? What's the cause?
So here's the key difference. We take a correlation we've already found, and then we design a study specifically to test if one thing is actually causing the change in the other. This is the gold standard. It's the highest bar to clear in research.
So back to our example one last time. How would we go from just finding a correlation, like between sanitation and disease, to actually trying to prove that one causes the other? Well, an explanatory study would be designed to figure out things like, does a lack of sanitation infrastructure directly cause an increase in disease? Or does improved childhood nutrition cause better school outcomes later on? See? We're looking for that cause and effect link. And that's absolutely fundamental because if you want to fix a problem, you have to know what's actually causing it.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap and pull all 4 of these powerful tools together. So here you can see how it all fits together. You've got descriptive asking what is happening, exploratory asking what's out there, correlational asking what's the link, and finally explanatory asking why is it happening. You can really see the progression here. A lot of times knowledge is built step by step, moving right through these stages.
But here's a thought. Is knowing what kind of question to ask enough? It turns out there's another huge piece to this puzzle. When you ask it. The timing can change everything.
So next time on The Explainer, we're going to dive into the time dimension in research. We'll talk about cross-sectional versus longitudinal studies and see how time itself can completely shape what we find. Hope to see you then.